Okay, yeah, hello everyone. This is an official CNCF satellite architecture session, and this is like the third architecture session we have regarding satellite. And today I would like to look a bit more on the API side to see what APIs do we have already identified and what should the APIs do. For recap, we have currently the following situation. Let me just share the screen, and I'll just walk over this diagram here. Okay, dokie. So our satellite uh, consists of three areas. One area that we firstly worked on was the satellite core, which is responsible for the local registry on the edge, and it's also fetching the images from remote. Was initiated by Roald, and the second component was ground control, and the third component is related to the container runtime. So this container runtime configuration or modification, which we did not yet start, right? And today we have Prasant, who was working on the ground control side and also on the satellite a bit, satellite core side. And we have Mehul, who will be working also on ground control, right? Extending ground control, and also I think satellite core, right? So he will be um, working on those areas, right? And so our current situation, I'm not sure, Xaba, if you saw the discussion and also um, the proposal. The thing is that we have changed a bit the interaction between the satellite and the ground control, you know. So initially we had we had this type of flow where the the satellite was talking to a dedicated API when this API had information about the configuration, the device registration, and the replication commands and things like this, right? Which we changed this a bit now so that the satellite is using only the OCI interface. I would not say only, but primary it is using the OCI interface to do everything. So it is also fetching the artifact itself from via the OSI interface from the registry, but it also gets the configuration and the state, right? So it has kind of I wrote here RPC commands, but I would rather call it uh, state. So it has the state, and the state is defined as uh, what should the registry, what should the satellite contain? So it defines what images should be in this registry, right? So this is kind of the state file. And this state file is also fetched from the OCI registry. And the main reason why I think it's better approach than just use the ground control. First is, because we're using OCI interface, we should leverage or push this boundary as much as possible. This is kind of a little, I think it's not a hard requirement, but it's more kind of nice to have. But the other interesting aspect of this is that we can also track the state and have the state verified at any given point in time. So, we can put signatures on state, we can verify the state, and we can, move back in time when we have the state in the OCI as well. So this becomes much more easier to deal with kind of a history and state and moving back in time. So it becomes much easier to say, I want to have the state from yesterday, right? This is much easier to accomplish than doing this with an API, REST API. So REST API would need to have kind of a code around that to support. And with the OCI, because the artifacts are not replaced, we can easily go back in time, and then we can also sign the state and verify the state on the satellite side, and then we can also follow multiple state at the same time, right? So we can have something like grouping and nesting and things like this, because the satellite core is able to follow not just one state, right? So currently it's just following one state, but it will be also possible to follow multiple states at the same time, and those multiple states can create a kind of a unified state, right? So you can follow the state of core images, and you can follow the state of application one or team one and team B. So you can do this kind of a grouping and yeah, with the state. Okay, and now we
it makes sense. We talk if you remember, we talked about this couple of like 5 months back that RPC might be the way to go, but we didn't really have enough knowledge at the time. So
yeah,
to me, it makes a lot of sense. The diagram doesn't, so I think it needs a bit more details, but it makes a lot of sense what you've just described.
yeah. And now why I think it makes sense to sit together again is like we have a new mentee, Mehul, who will continue the development, and we have already quite some work done already on ground control. So Prasant did already or did some foundation work on ground control and also the APIs. And I think it's yeah, we need to, I would say, kind of a reiterate the APIs and define what are the APIs doing, what is the purpose of the APIs, and what is the users of this API, so we can have a more API first approach on that and see that we have a clean API that will yeah, stay up to date for a long time. So yeah. And I asked Mehul and Prasant to prepare some APIs currently, to look at the APIs that we currently use, right? And I'm not sure if they have in which form they have it. Yeah. So maybe you can guys share this. I can read. Let me create a new note. Prasant, Mehul, where is the API? So we have it.
Yeah, I have the markdown file. Where should I post?
Let me just share this one. Invite more features, suggest edit. Let me share this with you. Node permission. Thanks for me. Can you paste it in here? Maybe it's working. Yeah, can you try to place this here? So I think you should be able to do so.
Yeah, I'm getting. Yeah, good. Okay.
So this is the API that we have. Is it the API that we have currently, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
So the satellite specific interfaces. So yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
this is
that
the
we
ground
did.
control interfaces, and the satellite specific interfaces are like
Gotcha.
these interfaces I intended to be called from satellite, right?
Yeah, this
Okay.
the down below needs to be done.
Okay.
So the 3 routes for registration and
Okay. Let's go top down. So we
Mm.
have so this is the ground control, and well, the ping. Well, ping is for health checks, right?
yeah,
Then we
health
have
and
health. Yeah.
What's
And
what's the difference? What's the difference between ping and health?
so ping is to check if the ground control is online, and the health is to check if the ground control is attached with the registry and also with the database. So health checks are different things attached to the ground control. Yeah.
Yeah, I think because we have the same.
Wait. Those are two separate things. So why are you using the ground controls endpoint to check auxiliary services health endpoints? Most databases will have some sort of health endpoint implemented for exactly these kind of monitoring reasons. Same for registries.
Mm.
I think Prasan did it because it is also a bit of a on the harbor side. So I'm not sure how it's done on ground control, but on the harbor side, it's like the health check will perform a connectivity test to the database, right? It will not check the health of the database. It will perform a connectivity check to the database to see if the application can reach the database, right? And
Yeah, that is fine. That is also one of the schools in Kubernetes readiness probes, where you not only check the readiness of the service, but you kind of verify that all the auxiliary services fulfilling the functionality are also, it's able to communicate with them. It's just a bit misleading to have it like this. But if it's the standard in Harbor that you're following, I'm okay with it. But to me, coming from a purely infra/bit of development background, this is confusing. But I can live with it.
but
If
okay.
this is the convention, yeah.
No, I mean, we can change it. We don't have to, we're not bound to that, right? But so how can we, in your opinion, how can this be, or what would be the better option to do this, or more, let's say, common option?
It's honestly a nitpick, so I wouldn't waste a lot of time on this. But for me, you can keep the health. I'm not sure about the ping, but yeah, to me, this is more of a readiness probe kind of concept in the Kubernetes ecosystem. If this is what Harbor follows, like I said, it's okay. But like first glance, even in the documentation that you have here, the difference is not that apparent. If you want to keep it, then you need to change the returns to health status of the service to be more descriptive.
Okay. Yeah, so this is more of, yeah. The ping is used for the readiness check, I think, in Harbor. I'm not sure, but yeah, this is like using for readiness. Okay. Then we have the third one is the registry list operation, and yeah, and the registry list is the list the images. We should not talk about images, but artifacts present in the central registry. So can you explain a bit more regarding that, Prasant?
Yeah. So the registry list command is nothing but the catalog which you fetch on the all OCI compliant registries have the catalog function. So which the lists all the OCI compliant repos that is present in the registry. So yeah, so which then you can select the artifacts which you need to replicate. So it's for that process to show the ground control operator what are the artifacts that are present in the registry. So
The naming is a bit misleading. Again,
Yeah.
because if I see registry list, I'm expecting a list of registries, not artifacts.
And also the audience is not consumed by control, ground control. So the audience is the GC operator, right?
Yeah.
So the audience is the operator of ground control, right?
Yeah, you can say that, but from the ground control perspective, it's like the ground control goes and fetches the list available in the registry and just it's for showing to the so it's more like a side command, which is
Who does invoke this API?
so when you try to add an image to a group of in the ground control, you try to add an image to the group. In that specific request, you will get what are the groups, artifacts present in the registry. So which then you can select the artifacts, then add it to the group. So
then in that case, then it's definitely artifacts dash list, and you have a typo in artifacts, but it's articats.
Articats. Oh, articats is finer than artifacts.
Yeah.
And just circling back to the first two, because I had it in a separate thread running in the background. If you want to keep this convention, then I would argue that the ping could be the liveness endpoint, a bit bastardized, and the health can be the readiness.
Okay. The service liveness.
Yeah, we're abusing the not liveness with a V, with a vowel.
With a V. Ah, yeah.
Yeah, vowel. Yeah, we're abusing the concept a bit here, but I think this is good enough. And health would be the readiness with the extended meaning of the readiness, which will be people in the Kubernetes space would argue with this, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the third one should be artifacts list if you're listing artifacts, unless you have multiple registries and you want to list all the registries that are available to you, then you could have a separate endpoint for registries that way.
Yeah. This is definitely artifact list. Yeah.
This brain is with I.
Yeah, instead of Y.
Yeah, the I.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so this is the artifact list. I'm still kind of struggling to understand, like, okay, I mean, so in my opinion, so we need to be a bit cautious here, like, if we want to re-implement the whole registry part, or if we want to re-implement Harbor UI, or if we want to extend the Harbor UI. So I think if you're fetching all the images from a registry, you will essentially need to have a UI that will display this list somewhere, right? And you need to sort, filter, group, categorize, like you need to do all the CRUD operations on this list for the user to be able to select where the user is. And so you essentially, you will end up with a UI that is reassembled the UI of Harbor. right? So I think that when you go that route, we will end up with the let's say with all the capabilities that is part of here, right? So like with the sorting, filtering, and like in all the glory and details, and all the way, and then someone will want to have vulnerabilities, signatures, and then you will end up with a clone of Harbor. Yeah. So in my initial idea, like when the whole Harbor satellite thing started, the initial idea was that you would kind of select in Harbor a replication rule. You can create a replication rule, and then in the replication rule you select the images you want to replicate, and instead of replicating these images to another registry, right? So you would replicate those images to some sort of a satellite, right? And you can say I want to replicate that satellite, and then satellite will then get these images somehow, right? And it's not, and then you would do the management of what should be in the satellite all from the UI of Harbor, because then we would not need to have the dedicated UI. And I think
I think
when-
we're sitting on the horse. It's a Hungarian saying. I think we're sitting on the horse in the wrong direction. Did you have like just a plain English description of the different functionalities that you want to see from the setup that you're describing right now? Without endpoints, without REST verbs, without endpoints, without any of the technical lingo, just plain English. So I want to be able to list all the artifacts, I don't know, present in the central registry. That's it. I want to be able to verify that the service is able to return a response, stuff like that. Because then once you have the basic functionality, then you can translate that into endpoints. But we're going at it from the different direction, where we have the endpoints first, and then we're trying to retrofit the endpoints to fit the functionality that we come up with on the fly.
Yeah, I agree with you. We're kind of in the wrong flight level here, right? So we should be on a different flight level at the moment, and then translate into the
to these endpoints, because this is technical implementation details on how you want that functionality to look at your interface level. But we don't really know, like, or I don't know, or I don't see it here, the functionality, just written down on its own.
Yeah. It should be from the user stories. There should be the kind of the user story. The user story should map to an API, right? So there's
Exactly.
multiple APIs, and then we can see which APIs are not there and which APIs need which data, so that user stories can be implemented, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, we're looking at this on a different perspective. Okay, so how should we approach this one? Because, well, now it's we started we started this whole thing with the wrong foot now, huh? And now I'm trying to revert back, or kind of find an exit here. How this should be done. I mean,
This is already implemented, no?
Partly it's implemented.
Or maybe, yeah, they can add like the JSON that returns and everything. That could be like a kind of proposal implementation to see what is each of these endpoints returning, maybe?
Do you want to do that by hand?
No. Just like reuse this kind of information to have like a kind of plain explanation of what this returns technically, maybe?
But that again is one layer below in implementation details, and that would usually be with OpenAPI or Swagger or some sort of API documentation tool. What I don't see is that I think Vadim, you have a good idea of what the end users want. Ideally, you would have, like you said, this is an excellent use case for user stories. As a ground control operator or as a satellite operator, I want to be able to do these things. You write that down, plain English, 2 sentences or 3 sentences, that's enough. And then you look at it as like, how is the service architecture going to fulfill this? And what kind of interfaces I need between the different components to make this happen? Because otherwise you'll be bogged down in these kind of small implementation details without seeing the big picture, what you're actually trying to do.
Yeah, that's totally correct. Okay. So let's. Okay. I mean, we have a few APIs. So this needs a completely different user story. So I think we can agree upon that one, that this needs a completely different user story, and this should be then a bit differently. So the group list is also maybe something that goes in the same direction. The label thing is also the same direction. The post image is okay. So this is the deprecated. Yeah, the post satellite. Okay, so the post satellite, we can have a discussion about this one. This is the for ground control admins, right? So ground control administrators or ground control operators, they will use this API to register a new satellite to the ground control system.
Yeah.
Is this correct, Prasant?
Yeah.
So the use case here is the following. So when you're a ground control operator and you would like to say now, okay, I would like to add a new satellite, right? A new device to my group or to my system. So you need to initiate this process, and this process will do the following. So you click, I would like to add a new device, and then you will get a token or a command with some information that you can use and copy and paste on the satellite console, so that it will maybe download the satellite binary, or it will just, you know, it can be a curl command or whatever, but it will basically do like registering this satellite to this ground control. It will have some sort of a, as you can imagine, this command that you can copy and paste into your CLI, and it will register, right? So it's like a satellite would register, and then it has a token and a URL where it should register with what token, and this is the command for the operator that the operator initiates, and it will return this information to the operator so that the operator can go on the satellite and execute it.
I have a purely pragmatic question here from an ops perspective.
Yeah.
If I have a fleet with 300 vessels and they all want to have their satellites, does that mean I have to make 300 post requests to ground control to register them?
That's the other approach, because this is something that we had briefly discussed, right? So this is part of the which is called the satellite onboarding, and it's like ZTR, which is the so there's like, I mean, I had exactly the same thought, right? And the idea is there should be multiple levels of satellite onboarding. There should be one level where you have just a generic key that you can, you know, provision the device. So when you're on the factory side or something, or and then it can automatically register. So it's always the same thing, right? And then the device can register. The other option is that you don't have anything of, so the satellite, the only thing a satellite needs is to have an endpoint URL. So there is no secret involved at all, because every device can register itself, but it needs to be approved on the other side, or if it's allowed or not. There is some use cases for that, but normally there is, in my opinion, there should be like two to three options for device onboarding.
Yeah,
So,
that's fine. That's completely fine. I just wanted to understand, like, how do you want to approach this part? Because it's usually not the registering that's problematic. It's the deregistering, because you over time end up, so these things come and go dynamically, right? And over time you can end up in a situation where you have all these like non-existent entities in your setup anymore. That's why what you've said, and this is where I was getting to, is like what the service meshes do with service discovery, something along those lines of self-registration and self-deregistration or auto-deregistration mechanism of some sorts has to happen for use cases where the fleet is not really manageable by a single operator anymore.
Yeah. This is definitely something that we need to look. But I think also in the scope of in the context here, right, to get something out of the door, I decided to, have a simple way to kind of let's say, to a certain extent, to get this off the ground, to have a common copy and paste satellite registration, which is have a token and that's it. And later on we can kind of add other options of device registration.
That's fine. But my first question, so if I'm coming in from an infra perspective, this is the first question that I would ask you as a customer.
So you mean with the dynamic nature, or what is
exactly? And keep in mind that a lot of the times, so I'm familiar with the shipping industry and maritime industry in this regard. A lot of the times, the actual crews physically on the vessel we've discussed this, they can lose connectivity for an indefinite amount of time, and a lot of the time these are not technical personnel. So registering and deregistering a device has to be done by a remote operator. And if, like, do you see the problems that kind of introduces if the device is incapable of registering that himself?
Yeah. That's
I have an idea there, because this is a kind of H application, right? And there are another kind of applications that used to use message queues like Kafka or something like that, but it's an internal implementation on how to access these kind of things. Like, let me remember what kind of systems. But let's say if you lose connection, you can have that devices on a queue, and when the system came back, start to pick this information then and register it with information that you have in the queue. But it's like a kind of a special way to install this kind of implementation, right? Like, for example, use a simple database, or use a database plus queues, and a database plus another thing that can permit you to have this kind of data without this kind of problems, let's say. But this, for me, is like as a specific kind of implementation to install this, not on how the API respond, right? It's something behind that, like at the level of infrastructure, right?
Something has to produce the event. Even if you introduce an event-driven architecture into this, there needs to be something on the edge, on the device, that is capable of producing that self-registration event, which leads back to my original point that is something that the device does on its own, not a human operator makes a REST API call. What I was getting at here is I only saw this endpoint, and I wanted to clarify with Vadim what was his or what the team's vision is for this, for how to work, Because if I am a infra operator of this and I have 300 vessels, then the first question will be, do I have to do this registration and deregistration manually every time a device comes online or is provisioned? And do I have to be on standby as an infra operator for the connectivity for the device to be available? Which in the maritime industry can be at 3 o'clock in the morning, depending on where the vessel is, and it can be 3 o'clock in the afternoon, or it can be anything for like a week. And if there's no automation behind it on the device level, then this becomes a whack-a-mole game of some engineer standing by, ready to make that REST API call, whether it can be registered or not.
Okay. So maybe yeah, as you are saying, like maybe something missing, not at the level of API, but a level that detect this kind of things, right?
The functionality, like
Yeah,
how this should work. Yeah, how this should work. Yeah.
Okay. I think that is something that should be added, right? Like you are right.
I mean, so
But definitely keep this endpoint. I agree with what you said. Like the ability for an operator to manually add and remove stuff should always be there. But you have to think about how are the customers or how are the end users going to interact with this entire setup.
Yeah. I mean, the other use case where, let's say, so I mean, the other use cases that I have seen in the field is the following: that you have this quarantine or landing zone functionality where each device can register if it has the IP, burned in. So the device has a burned in IP address, and the devices, when they come online, they will kind of register themselves in the landing zone. And then when the devices are registered and maybe online or offline, or had a health kind of a heartbeat sent, the administrator can then go and add this device from the landing zone or from the quarantine zone into the production zone, where the device can be then receive data and things like this. And before it's not approved the device, it stays in this landing zone. However, if you don't have any information about the device itself, right? So any context, the operator maybe only see this IP address of the device, or there needs to be some context added into the to the device, and this context needs to be either added on site, or it needs to be added when the device is manufactured or produced or whatever, right? So the operator on site can maybe read the number and say, like, this is device number 123, and then the operator on the other side can say, yeah, that's right, I'll add this device or something like this. But there needs to be some context. So if there is just a device that registers itself, it's not clear what device is it. So we need to have kind of a some context, because otherwise I don't think that.
So
I would maybe not call this just post satellite. I would maybe just call it the naming is a bit confusing, right? So it's kind of post satellite.
Another thing. So if this is about registering satellites, then in my head the endpoint would be something like -satellite-register.
Yeah, definitely, because there is more satellite options. Probably.
Yes, and then you in my, correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a while since I've done actual REST API development, but it's usually the resource name or some sort of, that's how you group these endpoints. So you have satellite add, satellite remove, satellite register, satellite list.
So yes, the satellite register thing needs to be done. So this entire part of registration with the Vadem said, which the main flow I thought of developing where um, if the user from the user perspective, if he needs to use the satellite thing, he needs to do the registration of the satellite on the deployment stage. So you can um, create this post request from the deployment stage. So we will ask the ground request for deploying the satellite. So I'm going to deploy this. So give me the details. So and on the deployment of the satellite, when the satellite comes online, it will register itself, and then yeah, the rest of it.
Yeah, but then it should have it should have then the other endpoint anyway. So it has like it should have another name.
And I assume you don't want to do API versioning at this point, right?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Then the same goes for group and labels. I think it's also a bit depending on the user story here. Then we have the API group images. Yeah, group images is
There's
the endpoint.
sorry, but can we go back to the label part a bit?
Yeah.
Okay, so is the label a resource on its own?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have a completely separate resource called a label that can have satellites, that can have images, that can have other things.
Not
Let me ask you this, because the traditional conventional method of this is like inversed. It's usually the label itself is usually not a resource. Label is a field of a resource that you use for indexing and grouping, not the other way around. So you don't add satellites to the label, you add a label field to the satellite.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, so it is kind of it's more like a label belongs or can be attached to a satellite. A label can be attached to a group and things like this, right? So
yes, not the other way around. That's the important part. So if you're designing this kind of REST API, then you always need to think about resources and how to access them and what kind of operations I want to perform on them. If the label is a resource, then you can keep it like this. But that is kind of an anti-pattern in my opinion, because it's like I said, the other way around, where the label is just a field and you basically do operations based on that.
Yeah. Let's wrap it around. Yeah, makes sense. And also group and images is the same thing, because it's not images, it's artifacts, right?
Okay, but the group is a bit different, because what can be in a group? What is a group?
Yeah, it's a similar thing to labels.
What's the difference?
Well, in my opinion, the major difference is that groups are nested, so you can have a group in a group, right? So this is something that you normally cannot do with labels.
Label is a key value pair. That depends on your implementation of what the value is.
Exactly. And
you don't have to answer these now, but these are the kind of things that pop up for me immediately when I look at this.
Yeah, I think we need to define also to see if we really need group enablers at the same time. I am not sure if we will get away with only labels. because the groups and labels essentially are like we need to be able to manage, let's say, hundreds of registries, right?
Mhm.
And you cannot manage each and single registry on its own, so you need to group them together or label them so that you can maybe define what images should be in this group and not what images should be in this registry or in this satellite, right? So you don't want to address it in a way like, I would like to define what images should be on this satellite. I want to define what images should be in this group, and this group can be multiple satellites, right? And then you can say, I want to have certain type of artifacts in all satellites, right? You have the base images, for example, or the core images that you always have, like let's say, imagine like a antivirus scanner, right? So, and you want to have antivirus scanner application on every device, right? So, and then you put this under its own label, and then you can combine labels and groups together to form a set of a state that will then be have a certain set of images that can be present on the satellites, right? So this is kind of the background information on groups and labels. And I'm not sure if we will get away with only labels and only, with only labels.
That's fine. So you can have a resource called groups, but then number 10 is the other way around, because you add the satellite to the group, not the group to the satellite. So this is why it would be super important to have the business case and the resource hierarchy mapped out, because again, we're approaching it from the wrong direction. You should ideally have this all mapped out in your head, because if you're writing a REST API like this, you're just trying to manage resources.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Yeah.
Also, like a practical tip. It's much easier for anyone reviewing this if the resources are grouped together. So all the satellite related endpoints in one section, all the group related endpoints in another section, all the whatever related endpoints in one section, because this is now mixed and matched, and it's difficult to follow the logical flow of the operations that you want to perform.
Yeah. Okay, but this is a good point. We need to address this correctly. So I think like group and satellites, this should be then probably the vice versa. Okay, so let's take a look at the other ones. Satellite artifacts. So this is the other ones. The group. Let's labels, artifact labels. Label artifacts. This is a bit weird because I'm not sure if labels or artifacts should. So this is a bit interesting. Labels have artifacts? No. Artifacts have labels?
Artifacts have a field called label that is empty. That is an empty array by default.
Yeah, but I'm not sure if artifacts should have labels, in my opinion.
Why not?
Because in this case, we don't actually hold the artifact. We just hold the reference to our artifact. So the artifact is actually held in the registry itself.
So the fact that the actual artifact file is not present in a remote persistent storage doesn't mean that the entity cannot exist. There's a difference between the two. One is the actual like byte code that you have as an artifact, and the other is an entity that you represent as a REST resource. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I don't have to have the content of my Docker images. Like I don't need to have the bytecode to be able to have a list of the images that my fleet operates with.
Correct.
Because I just want to tell my remote registry that these are the names of the images that I want to be replicated to the edge. And then it is not the concern of ground control to hold the bytecode, because that's the registry.
Exactly.
The concern of the ground control is to hold the list of the artifacts that you want to replicate.
Exactly.
And then it is a resource in the REST context. And if it is a resource, then it can have a label.
And then you can group this somehow by the label.
Yes.
Yeah, but then we have different type of labels, because you can have a label on the satellite, right? So you can attach a label to the satellite, and you can attach the label to an artifact, right? And they don't have to be necessarily the same thing, or they can be.
Labels are usually unstructured key value pairs that you put whatever you want in. That is why they're a field on the resource itself. Usually, if you follow the Kubernetes standards in metadata.
Yeah.
This is like metadata field. If you want to use it, use it. If not, empty. Okay.
Exactly.
Makes sense. Also could be the same, the labels and the group fields, I think. The same thing, metadata.
If the group is a bit different, because we've discussed that you want to use it as a resource on its own, while label is just a field.
Yeah, then it makes sense to have them both, right? So now
yes, yeah. Because this is why, like, the user story is important, because okay, I have a group, I have like one parent group that has everything in it, and then I have child groups in those. But let's say I have images with the label of mandatory or minimum, and I want to be able to replicate that to all the satellites and all groups. That's how these two can interact. But this requires like sitting down and thinking through, okay, how does my resource hierarchy look like? What do I want to achieve? And how can I make that happen with the tools that the industry has developed over the years? And labels are one of them. But you're right, you could argue that the group could also be a field on the resource, not an entity on its own, but it's a bit more difficult to manage it that way. Because you have to think about, okay, how does this look from the front end's perspective? How do I filter? How many elements do I get back from a list call? Because then it becomes like a performance optimization issue. If it's a resource field, if it's a field in the resource, you have to get all the resources. But if it's an entity on its own, a resource on its own, then you just need to get the group. So you're more performant on the front end.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's better.
I have a hard stop at 4, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, so I think we need to have another session where we maybe go over the use cases more in detail. So kind of write them out and kind of iterate them over the use cases and then map and then see which interfaces pop up and which we can map already and which we need to modify. We have a few of other registries that we need to create. But yeah, I mean, it was not today as intended, but it was good anyway, right? So it was, it didn't yield the outcome they expected, but the outcome that we get was good to get a start. Give it another go. Yeah, I will prepare the kind of use cases a bit and document them in a file, and then we can go over the use cases together. I think this makes sense. Then maybe have another session, maybe next week or next Friday, to do the same thing.
Yeah, and get the customers if you can to be part of it, because you're building for them, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have a customer here, but he is a bit quiet, huh?
Yeah, sorry, been swamped.
Right.
There is a kind
But
of small document to describe the architecture ideas and like a quick or agile kind of development. Maybe you can use that instead of do a full and huge document, so and have the same information. So
Yeah. You can add me to that, Vadim, if you want.
yeah, of course.
If hopefully I can make it. What I would like to ask is, I skimmed through the repo real quick. There's no info in the markdown file on how to deploy this locally. That would be super useful, because I would love to test this myself and see how it behaves.
That's a good point.
Like the quick start, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried it also, and okay.
But I really like that there are end-to-end tests. So good job there.
Yeah, and we need to kind of tweak them a bit to make them work with Dagger, but yeah.
Vadim, did you have a specific question towards me, or didn't you? I'm sorry, I lost track. Yeah, after a while on API talks, but if you have.
No, not at the moment, but we need kind of a more kind of user input. What is the kind of a use case and requirement from the user
Yeah.
side for the potential users, to see how we can map how our vision or how our concept map on the requirements of the user, right?
Yeah, I understand.
That's why I was mentioning you.
Don't worry. Happy to be there, even if I'm not contributing much, but yeah, always interesting.
Okay, guys, I have to go. But I think this was a fruitful discussion, at least.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time and your input. Very valuable. And yeah, I'll try to set up something for next week, and then we can maybe have a review of that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very
Sure.
much.
Thank you.
very much,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.